kind of wondering if we should get into like some psychedelic renaissance stuff or
Psychedelic renaissance, like
what do you think of
in what
that?
way?
Well, yeah, I mean, just in the broader context of it, I guess, like after the 1960s, it basically became impossible to do
Mm.
research on psychedelics.
Yeah.
I don't know when that officially stopped. There's a whole history here. But I believe it was like 2015, Imperial College of London
Mm.
got the ability to do a LSD study again.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and that was like after like a 50, 60 or like
Seems a little bit.
basically.
It seems a little bit redundant at this point. I
Mm.
mean, like, are they gonna discover anything that like hasn't been kind of publicized in that time since? I mean,
Well, I would
It's
say
kinda-
yes.
you think okay, yeah,
But
yeah.
we previously talked about this DMTX.
Oh, the infusion thing.
Yeah, like the extended release DMT.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
This is like brand new, basically, right?
I never like. I think they did complete that, and there was never really much follow up from that. There never seemed to be much.
I think it's ongoing.
It was a few years ago, right? I think this was pre-COVID, was it? Or
Yeah, I
feel like
mean,
it
I think they
was-
started it around then. I
Mm.
recently heard them on the podcast. I think this is the same people. I'm not sure.
Okay,
But
yeah.
apparently their situation is they got basically carte blanche
Oh, yeah.
in some Caribbean island to research any psychedelic for any purpose.
Okay, yeah.
So like they don't have to like smuggle the kind of experience in through the back door as with some of the other studies. Like for example,
It's like a university or something. Yeah.
well, like the Rick Strassman study on DMT, right? Like basically what he actually was researching, the data he was like collecting and publishing was like, you know, like heart rate during.
Okay, yeah. It was just like physiological data.
But
I mean,
it's just a proxy for like academically studying
Yeah.
DMT, right?
I mean, it is important to have that. I mean, you do need some like basic, I don't know, safety information or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
It needs to be. Yeah, I'm just looking at this now, like this. DMTX or extended release. What's his name? Andrew Gallimore, who I think someone. I don't know if it was.
This is the guy in Okinawa, right?
Someone met him here like. I think it was during COVID. It might have been Will actually.
Oh, interesting.
Someone told me they just like met him in a Shibuya bar, like just completely random
by chance.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
just
crazy.
completely a chance. And it's like, oh, I'm Andrew Gallimore. I'm this like psychedelics research. And he's just like apparently just getting drunk in a Shibuya bar or something.
Just at the hub or something.
Yeah. I was like, I wish you had given me a call, man. I mean, like,
Well, yeah, this is pretty classic Will behavior. But
I don't know if I don't know if this really was Will. I mean, it's someone told me this like let me see if I can actually find it here.
Might be irrelevant for now.
But he's interestingly this Andrew Gallimore is in Japan. Japan.
Well, I believe he's like in University of Okinawa.
Yeah.
So that
seems
kind
like
of an
he's.
interesting
I want to
connection.
do. Someone sent me his book, and it looked really interesting. I really wanted to read his. I think it's called Alien Information Theory.
Yeah, that was from Will. Will suggested that.
Nah, it might have been someone else sent me that.
Back off the mic just a bit.
Okay, I'm a little bit. Okay, no, this was Devin, who used to be another Bukuro resident.
Oh wait, he suggested this, or
no, he says
he bumped into
this
him.
is 2022, right?
Oh,
So he's like,
crazy.
I met an interesting fellow last night at a bar. He's a neuroscientist who focused on DMT studies since the 1990s. His name is Andrew Gallimore. Figured since you're more knowledgeable, maybe you might have heard of him. I'm just like, well, we randomly just met Gallimore in a bar. It's pretty
pretty
funny.
crazy,
It's
yeah.
pretty funny, but
Interesting.
Yeah.
What was his involvement in the Strassman studies? Do you know?
I don't remember. Okay, so this guy's Devin is like, he was in Shibuya last night. He was talking about keeping people in the DMT space for like hours or potentially days. I have his Instagram. He was wasted, but I could probably send him a message.
Oh, that's funny.
It's kind of funny, but
Should follow up.
yeah. Well, I think I am like, I don't know, friend. I was like friends with him on Facebook or something. Connected in some parasocial way or something, but
I wonder if we can get them on. Actually, would be kind of fun.
Maybe, yeah, we could.
We have the technology.
We have the technology. Can make it happen.
Just need the access, right?
Possibly could. I mean, if he was in the area, I guess. I mean, I don't know if he's based out of Okinawa.
Probably
usually,
still,
but,
yeah. But I mean, you can't be in Japan without kind of visiting Tokyo or something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
we could try to get in touch with him, and if this is something people would be interested in hearing,
sound off in the comments.
Yeah, sound off in the comments.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
There's interesting people, and he's definitely someone that'd be interesting to have on and go into.
But yeah, so I heard some of the people who were involved in DMTX. I don't know exactly like how, like, is this kind of open source technology that various people are now using, studying. But yeah, so these two fellows, I guess I'll pull up their name just so I don't keep vaguely
just like
referring to them.
Or?
Yeah, I mean, it was on the Aubrey Marcus podcast, which some people might hate. But
some people might hate. Why?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, so yeah, like Aubrey Marcus, Joe Rogan affiliate #1.
Yeah.
You know Alpha Brain?
No.
So
Alpha Brain.
This was like the archetypal nootropic that was being like
like modafinil or something?
Well, no, I mean, even before that, I mean, they were basically kind of, I don't know what the active component there is, but I believe it acted on the choline receptors.
Okay, yeah.
So it's like kind of like piracetam, tier. I mean, I'm probably mispronouncing that. I've only ever been, anyway. So him and Joe Rogan launched the brand on it. 15 years ago or whatever. Probably longer than that. And, you know, they had Alpha Brain as their premier product, which was, you know, like, I drink one of these every day and it helps me be focused and productive, blah, blah, blah. You know, possibly snake oil. No doubt about it. But maybe there's something beneficial there. But all that aside, some people view Aubrey Marcus as like kind of the archetypal evil hippie.
He's an evil hippie?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, yeah.
Well, so like...
He's just like giving people drugs or something? Like, what is he...
Well, the unfavorable representation of him is like, okay, his dad was like a high-frequency trader. His dad like invented high-frequency trading or something.
Like day trading or something? Like,
well, I don't know what exactly it was, but basically he was like a high-profile like finance guy in the 19...
Like 70s,
70s, I guess. Yeah, sounds about right. And so, you know, he kind of grew up with like a silver spoon in his mouth, and arguably has never had to know like real financial struggle, right? Real economic struggle. And, you know, like his career history is kind of, you know, like on it. You know, like I think now he has like an essential oils line. What else was he like promoting? He has some project which was you could like buy like a trip in a space balloon, I believe. Like you could go up in space. Anyway, he's kind of one of these like what's the word here? Can you say yuppie? Is that the right thing?
Yuppie hippies, maybe?
I guess, yeah. But it's like he like grew up in California to, you know, in comfortable financial circumstances, and like, you know, some people might criticize his contributions to the world, right? Like you could just paint him as like a snake oil salesman or whatever. It's hard to articulate. Like you either appreciate his energy or not, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
But that being said,
he's just like appearing on Joe Rogan or something.
Yeah, apparently they've like fallen out of favor kind of in the last decade or so. But he was like an early guest there, and I think they remained business partners. But it seemed like he stopped showing up for some time ago. This is all recording. Got very paranoid for some reason.
You got paranoid that I didn't. Disturbance in the recording.
Like something like that.
This reminds me of like people that think that like Charles Manson is like was like a misunderstood hero or something.
Mm.
You know, like, are you familiar with this or?
Vaguely, but tell
There's
me
people
about it.
that, well, I mean, there's a subset of people that think that like, not only did Charles Manson do nothing wrong, but he was like, he's actually like a spiritual, like visionary or something. He's like a, you know, I mean, he's a good guy basically. He's not like some, you know.
Well, I
murderous.
guess like if you're part of his cult back then, I could see you believing that, but like I guess like what's the rationale for this now?
It goes deep, man, and I don't even I have very little personal interest in this actually, but it's just one of these things that like circles around, and you know, there's like occult people interested in this, like there's like conspiracy people interested. I mean, there's a lot of people that are on this, you know, like Manson did no wrong trip, and like from what I've only looked at it very briefly, but like they think that it was mostly, it was like the
wasn't he like MKUltra or something? Yeah,
sort of, yeah. So there's
like
people
the CIA basically set him up to be
yeah.
that,
So
right?
that I think that's one of the takes, and like the other one is like, if I can remember right, the other one is like it was all just like a drug deal gone wrong.
Oh, like
so like so like the people that so apparently like the people that, you know, murdered like Sharon Tate and well, like the main
event,
murder,
right?
yeah, the main event.
They broke into some night,
yeah.
And,
so
some
like
house
so
and,
I guess like there's a take that like it was actually just some, like they're owed drug money and like they'd been threatened in reverse or so. I don't know. There's some take that like it had, not only did Manson not order it, but he like didn't really even have anything to do with it.
Right.
And he was just like some random, you know, good vibes hippie that just happened to be living with these, you know, murderous drug selling cultists. You know? But otherwise, but I mean, I guess he didn't actually, I don't know. I mean, I know again, it's not something that super interests me either way, but this is very much like a hill that some people are willing to die on.
Sounds like a fun rabbit hole.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly seems like a pretty, some people have clearly put a lot of time into this rabbit hole, and I don't know. I mean, for me, like I watched videos of Charles Manson and I'm like, yeah, this is not a particularly enlightened dude. Like I don't know what I don't know what headspace you'd have to be to, like, did you ever see videos of Charles Manson?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember what the one that like really sticks out in my memory is, and I think like the interviewer like asks him like, "Who am I?"
Yeah,
or who is he?
Says,
and he
like,
goes into this like weird loop.
He says things which like seem profound-ish,
right?
You know, but like until you're like, wait a minute, you're just saying stupid shit. Like, come on, bro. Like,
well, it's like, what?
I mean, yeah,
I did acid twice type like thoughts or something.
Yeah, there's even some people that I think I would otherwise be usually have good takes, and like even some of these people are like sometimes like, I don't know, quoting Manson or something. Like, this dude is not really that.
Yeah.
Definitely don't think he was like any kind of enlightened figure, much less, you know, like a visionary or something. But
yeah, I mean, I could see like I'm drawing a weird parallel to Ross Ulbricht.
Yeah.
Do you know? You know Ross Ulbricht, right?
Guy, right? Yeah.
Because like I feel like he's kind of similarly divisive in that.
Wasn't he like psy-opted into like trying to assassinate someone, or
basically,
like,
yeah,
they were trying to get him to, yeah.
So like basically what happened, and he was recently pardoned, actually. Served 15 years, I believe.
Right.
I don't know if he's officially out yet, but I
think
believe
he is. I think he's actually
nice.
Yeah.
That's great news, I think. Basically, the situation was that, like the theory, the conspiracist take on it is that he basically was a victim of like parallel construction, where you know, the feds or whatever authorities that were trying to take down the marketplace they were taking it down one way, but had to like back engineer a legal.
Oh, like just well, yeah. So they like psy-oped him into like.
Yeah, well, they basically entrapped him.
Yeah,
the person from whom the person's basically like, oh, someone was messaging him and was like, oh, this guy like who betrayed you, he's like a real problem.
Yeah,
like I can take care of that problem for like $50K.
Yeah,
and like Ross like kind of agreed to it or something. It seemed very kind of.
But this was actually like a Fed, right?
Yeah, it was actually like a Fed.
It was like a Fed, right?
But I mean, the kicker is like he wasn't convicted of that. What he was actually convicted of was like running the marketplace,
just running a cartel, right? Yeah.
But they just painted him as like a murderer, right?
Yeah.
So like that's unfair, right? That's like that's something. I don't know what that is, but it's like. You can't be, I don't know, it's like jury bias or something, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't even know if he was tried in front of a jury, right? Might have been just sentencing. I don't know how it went. But yeah, some people are like, like Ross Ulbricht was a I don't know, a saint, not a saint, a martyr.
Oh, martyr too. Okay, yeah.
Like, fundamentally he was just like a libertarian, like marketplace, right? Like, he wasn't actually, like, what did he do? He just built a technology that connected supply to demand, right?
I think there's an element of that, man. I mean, I'd like to, I think like, I think that's a pretty complicated situation, and like, it's sort of like, and I'm sure like in his mind, that was his initial motivation. Whereas like, I'm just going to like create this, libertarian decentralized space where, there has, but I think if you're, it's sort of like people, I think it was like some Kurt Vonnegut quote or something where it's like,
which is Iowa Writers Workshop alumni, as I learned.
Interestingly, one of the legit ones, I guess. I mean, I think like Philip Roth is legit too, but he said something like one of the takes from one of his books is you are what you pretend to be, right? So if you're basically being a drug dealer, then you're gonna end up actually functioning in the world of drug dealers, for better or worse, right? And from what I don't really have a take either way, but I do think that Ross seems to have been well intentioned, and I can't really say either way, but it does seem like most of the stuff he was put away for was Fed ops trying to kind of like trap him into stuff, right?
Yeah.
But was it completely harm free? Well, I don't know, but
nothing in the dark,
so in
the underworld is.
I'd be hesitant.
Right?
I'd be hesitant to say that what he was doing was completely like some angelic thing or something.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like he kind of was a drug dealer.
Yeah.
So I mean, whether that's whatever your take on drug dealers is, but I don't know if I would say he's like some super martyr of, freedom or whatever.
Yeah.
He maybe created an interesting new way to be a drug dealer.
Yeah.
Again, for better or worse, like whatever. I'm not saying it's, good or bad.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, the funny thing is that he he didn't sell any narcotics, right?
Well,
so let's like, can you?
Yeah, but you're still
he's a system administrator.
Yeah,
right?
but you're still creating something which is doing that in practice.
Yeah,
so kind of have to take some responsibility. I mean, again, like if he was like, well, yeah, this stuff should be legal, then I would say, well, yeah, I agree, man.
Yeah,
like, I think it should be, but
yeah,
it like I guess like play by the book, then you're gonna.
What is it? Live by the sword
or die
by the sword, right?
Yeah,
so
I mean,
it just kind of is what it is.
I think that it should, like most of that stuff should be.
Yeah, I mean, like serving lifetime for that is like, I mean, that's just That's just the what is it, like the current power structure, like
Yeah.
putting their thumb down on you.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty transparently
Yeah.
not justified.
It's complicated.
I guess,
It's complicated arguments, man. I mean, there's like the argument is that like I think like this Singapore argument is like, or you know, a lot of these like Southeast Asia countries are. Well, I mean, not even necessarily. You know, we could say African countries or Middle Eastern countries or Islamic countries in some ways, which is just, you know, there's no drug problem because we just kill people that do drugs.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, well, certainly one way of dealing with it, but
there's no problem, right?
Yeah.
Because all the problems get handled internally before it ever reaches the light of day of society, right?
Like on one hand, there's that, but then I guess the flip side is that like literally like the U.S. is like if you look at a lot of neighborhoods in the U.S., they're just like fentanyl,
Yeah.
you know, opioid destroyed.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
there's literally opioids.
Well, it's downtown LA,
Yeah,
right?
so
like Skid Row, whatever.
a lot of you know, there's an argument that society literally can be destroyed in a lot of ways through out of control, you know, drug use. So
yeah, for sure.
Is there an enlightened middle ground? Well, like, you know, like something like alcoholism in Japan where
that's legal, so it's okay.
Well, I just mean in the sense of like it's
okay to piss your pants at 4 a.m. and pass out on the subway.
But I guess just going along with that, like the level of toleration for alcohol, I would say in Japan is comparatively high, even by any world standards.
Yeah,
but there's maybe not the same level of like, you know, violence and sheer destruction associated with it, because again, maybe it is sort of, the culture is sort of elastic enough to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question is, it's sort of like the French argument, you know, like are giving wine to 12-year-olds so they don't turn into alcoholics, right?
Yeah.
Because if you restrict it until you're like 21, well then they're not gonna have any. Like, I'm sure if you like restricted like if cookies were illegal, there'd probably be like underground diabetics who were like just hoarding, I don't know, chocolate chips. Right? So anything that is like crazily restricted beyond reason, then you're gonna create like an artificial, you know, problem, I guess, in that sense. So
like I think the best, most convincing argument, I guess, is like the rat park experiment.
Well,
you've heard of it.
Yeah.
So just to briefly sum it up for the viewer, who I'm sure has also heard it, but the idea is, if you take a rat and you put it into an empty cage with just the cocaine water and the non-cocaine water, that rat is gonna keep drinking the cocaine water until it dies, right? But you know, you take the same rat, you take a heroin addicted rat, and you put it into a playhouse with other rats. You know, like there's a bunch of dust to roll around. There's a slide. There's other rats to play with, and the heroin addicted rat, like, seemingly, you know, cures itself of the addiction like immediately and has no desire to, like, even though the heroin is still accessible in that new rat park,
right?
It just doesn't go back to it, right? So I think that's it, right? I mean, like, you create a hellish economic circumstance where, you know, like, it's easy to fall down the ladder but very hard to climb back up, right? And you end up with Skid Row in Los Angeles, right? I mean, China, of course, loves exporting fentanyl and has zero concern or repercussions of like what happens to stuff after it leaves the country, right? Like China just doesn't care, right?
They're not bothered, right?
Of course, it's a completely different story if it's if it ever winds up like within their country, right? To them it is probably just payback for opium war.
Opium wars,
was just the exact same thing
in
reverse, right? So yeah, that sucks. Skid Row sucks. Shouldn't exist, right? People are suffering.
Yeah.
People who don't even touch fentanyl are negatively affected
Yeah.
by this, right? But this is just a much larger systemic problem, right?
Well, that's sort of what I was suggesting. I mean, like, I think that, like, I do imagine there could be a society that is culturally elastic enough that even, you know, heroin and opioids would be just legal or what. I mean, well, I mean, they used to be, right? They did used to be.
Yeah. I mean, so stuff's crazy decriminalized in like Czech Republic.
Czech.
I
Okay,
believe. Yeah. I mean, like you can have like up to like a gram of heroin on
Okay,
you,
yeah,
and like the police can't.
Can't really do that much. Yeah.
Well, I mean, culturally, they don't care either. They're like,
Yeah.
you know, are you okay? Like, right?
Yeah. Well, it used to be. I mean, again, it used to be just a legal.
It used to be
substance you could
prescribed, right?
Just prescribed by,
to give it
by
to
doctors.
kids,
Yeah, used to
right?
give it to kids in the
Yeah.
in the 19th century. Because the kids were making noise. So
Naturally.
if you give them alcohol and opioids at the same time,
Right.
you're probably not going to make as much noise.
Yeah.
Right? It's problem solved.
High five.
Problem solved, right? Problem solved. Right?
Yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
Possibly go wrong. Yeah. So yeah, I guess like I wish we lived in a Ross Ulbricht world where like it was that in practice is it going to play out like that way? I'm not super.
Yeah, I mean Netherlands is kind of on that scale.
Yeah. But again, I think there's maybe. I think getting to the point where you have a culture that can handle that is maybe harder than just like changing a law.
Mhm.
Like changing laws is pretty easy, but like changing an entire cultural, I don't know, ecosystem or something, that's a lot harder to do.
But I mean, it's also kind of a thing where like if you start babying your culture or the participants in the culture, then they're just going to get more and more inept at actually handling life until, you know, they can't survive anywhere outside of their native culture.
Well, I don't know what you would call the US. I mean, that's sort of what,
or Japan, really.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah. Japan is like that too, but
US, interesting. It doesn't just apply to all cultures.
Well, but I feel like Japan. I feel like maybe the difference is that
Australia,
is that Japan works. Like it's maybe not.
Fair enough.
It's maybe not like you probably can't really like export the model. Well, this is what I mean. Like I don't feel that like. I feel like the model is maybe not exportable, but it does.
Like the U.S. could not be as permissive with alcohol as.
U.S. is like the worst. The U.S. is just built on these bizarre foundations of
over
one way or the other. I mean, you're either prohibition, which again creates Al Capone and gang war, like just taking these extreme.
Or you have spring break with kids. So
it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, like if you look at history, I mean, it's like what, like the entire prohibition period. It's like you literally they might as well have been killing people over like cookies or something,
right?
Like so stupid. I mean, like creating this entire underground empire based on like alcohol. Like it's kind of silly at the end of the day. I mean, it's like you know. What is it really that? I mean, it's pretty crazy when you really think about it, right? It's just alcohol. Like, it's not like, I don't know, gold or something. I mean, it's like,
I wonder if it's like growing pains of civilization or something. Like, does everything trend towards either complete libertarianism or complete authoritarianism?
Well, I mean,
like now cannabis is quasi legal in most of North America.
Yeah. But I don't think, I mean, I think like permissiveness versus actually having a functioning society is a bit of a. I mean, you could argue that the U.S. might eventually end up very permissive, but it might not be a very functional, stable, or functional society. Whereas a lot of these, well, that's like if you look at, I don't know if you know much about Singapore.
Not too much, I guess,
Well, like,
but
do you know how Singapore was founded or created?
it was like a port city
Yeah.
state type thing, right?
Yeah.
But
So
fill me in.
I mean, they had to like the main architect of Singapore, a man known as Harry Lee Kuan Yew, right?
Okay.
He had the very British name of Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because he was educated.
But he was like Malaysian or something,
He was
or
Chinese, right?
Chinese,
Chinese.
like mainland China,
So
or
it used to be. Originally, it was just called Malaya, right?
okay.
So it was just one. Singapore and Malaysia were the same thing, and
Mhm.
so Lee Kuan Yew found himself having to be like, well, how am I going to do this, right? Because again, it's like a colonial port.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty dodgy. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of like heroin and alcohol and drug trade stuff and some pretty dodgy.
What time is this happening in? Like
with the
1800s, or
no, this is like the 20th century. This is
Okay.
like 19. When was it founded? 1950, I want to say.
okay.
It's fairly recent, right? So, and it was a very complicated situation because it was kind of a multicultural. You had like Chinese, Indians, Malays,
Yeah.
right? So again, in creating this, Singapore is fuck. I'm trying to find when was this?
Maybe besides the point. I
Yeah.
mean, just conscious.
I mean,
of,
I think it is kind of relevant, but
Okay.
fuck, when is
Well, we can check this quite quickly.
yeah,
I think.
check this out. My Google
Um,
hand is
when
created
was Singapore
as a state, I guess.
annexed? Was it ever annexed?
Oh no, okay, so yeah, 1965, right?
Yeah,
1965. So separated from Malaysia in 1965, right?
Due to political, economic, and racial differences.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So in order to have it functional and stable, I mean, like in practice, like Lee Kuan Yew had to be a bit of a dictator, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he had to create these like, again, I remember when I was a little kid, it was quite famous. I mean, Singapore was famously harsh, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, the story that I think everyone knows is
Yeah.
the Australian guy who like graffitied and
Yeah,
got
yeah.
caned,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, they had to do that, right? So I mean, the initial situation is incredibly unstable.
Why was it unstable?
Well, because again, it's a former colony where there's
of Britain.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's a British colony. There's no
When was that founded?
I want to say 19th century.
Okay.
Like 18.
So give it another 100 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a British port, and
The Treaty of Singapore was signed on 6th of February 1819, right? So it's the 19th century, right?
okay.
So there's no real unity, right? So you have a multi-ethnic and
Yeah.
religious country. So there's no there's no underlying real unity there.
And it's all just centered around trade
Yeah.
at the port, right?
Yeah.
Like everything else is auxiliary
Yeah.
to it.
So
It's literally just here's the water and the land where multiple.
yeah. So they couldn't.
Yeah.
So they couldn't really work out having a unified Malaya
Right.
without the British. So Lee Kuan Yew is like, all right, well, we're just gonna have our own, basically a Chinese state, right?
Mm.
And he does have some quote like that. He says something like, like if you want to have a functional Chinese state in these circumstances, like you got to have some, knuckle dusters or something. You got to be a little bit hardcore, right? So he creates like, he's basically a dictator, right? So you create a very strict and rigid society, which from the outside people will be like, oh, it's a little bit repressive. You're caning people, like you're hanging people doing drugs, you're arresting people for chewing gum or whatever, right? Like, so from the outside you're like, okay, this is a little bit. And even William Gibson, the neuromancer, even William Gibson did this famous article in the 1990s called Disneyland with the Death Penalty, where he's like going around Singapore and he's like trying to find like He's like trying to find like underground culture and people having fun or whatever, doing stuff and singing. He's like, I couldn't
find anything.
Couldn't find anything. It's very like it's like 1984 kind of. He's very he's very critical of Singapore at the time. Which if you're reading this in like, I don't know, Wired in the 90s,
right?
You're like, oh wow, Singapore must suck, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, but then like, okay, William, like, let's see you create like a state. Like, how are you gonna run? Like, okay, let's put like 4 different ethnicities with radically different religious and economic, like, okay, throw them all in the blender, and create a workable first world economy,
right?
Out of like, try it, bro. Like, okay, if you think Lee Kuan Yew is, right. So I mean, like, Lee Kuan Yew obviously is a very intelligent man that knew what he was doing, and like was the country he created a place that like I personally would like to live? Well, no, but at the same time, like, it worked. Like, economically, it was a massive success. It's basically a straight from third world economy to first world,
right,
with very little ramp up,
right?
And it's, living standards are incredibly high, right. So okay, you can criticize him now, and maybe I think it's time where Singapore does need to probably chill a little bit, and, become something else.
I think the world needs to chill a little bit, right? I mean,
but particularly,
Singapore, certainly some like
say
Stone Age kind of I don't know, thinking there in some ways.
Well, I don't know if you could say Stone Age, man, because again, these are incredible tensions where like, if you remove some kind of external force like the British, then what are people going to fall back on? Well, they're just going to fall back on the usual, tribal, ethno-nationalist, kind of stuff. So how are you going to create a modern kind of? I feel like I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here, because Lee Kuan Yew is a very complicated. I mean, there's that dissident. What was his name? Amos Lee or something. He was just a young kid who was arrested multiple times for defaming Lee Kuan Yew. Like, when I think it was,
he was Singaporean, or
he's a Singaporean. Well, I don't know if you can,
I don't know if you can university student.
Yeah, it's just like some kid that was like, Lee Kuan Yew died, and he just made some YouTube video like, like, ding dong, the witch is dead. Like, fuck Lee Kuan Yew.
Right,
so, and as you would expect, he got police showed up, and like, what are you doing, bro? Like,
right,
this is the founder of the nation. Like, you can't really do this like right after he dies, right?
Which, fair enough, I guess.
Yeah,
indeed, it is a very difficult question. Now, I'm just trying to think about this, because I'm torn on one hand, where I'm like there is, I don't know, fundamentally, I agree with libertarian ideals, right? Like, freedom is everything, right?
But like,
so, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious to try and enforce some stuff where it's like, this molecule exists, and if you have it, then you're like dead, right?
I guess like I'm trying to. I wish I had these quotes available. I mean, we could maybe add them later. But like, I think there was some. There's some quotes where like Lee Kuan Yew was describing like trying to fix the society, and like I think people did put stuff like this to him. Like, they're like, why are you running such a tight ship? And he's like, well, because like this is colonial port where like people don't know how to wipe their ass. Like, they're like wiping their ass with their hand.
Right.
You think they're gonna handle like sophisticated freedoms to like barely fucking put I mean, he's just criticizing everything, the infrastructure, the hygiene standards. So yeah, I mean, like, you have a law about chewing gum. I mean, it seems a little bit ridiculous until you're like, well, wait, like, if this wasn't there, like, obviously there's some
I think so. Do you want to finish the
Oh,
thought?
that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so I think I have the sort of counterexample where, okay, you create a restrictive society that runs smoothly, right?
Yeah.
And people stop reproducing, right? Like at some point along the way, like with all the freedom.
No, it's the other way around, man. It's the other way around.
No,
it's totally the other way around. People stop reproducing in more relaxed, permissive societies. In the strict traditional tight ship societies, they actually do reproduce, right? Well, that's why they're
it's just very traditional, I guess.
Well, that's why they're conservative societies, right? So
okay, so like the society loses the joie de vivre, no?
Well, but
like you take away all the spontaneity, you take away the, I don't know, explorative element of existence.
Yeah.
And you're left, being a NPC at Family Mart or whatever, right? Or at
I mean I would say that's Japan. I mean
Sumitomo, whatever.
Singapore,
right?
I think Singapore is still in a very dynamic phase. Again, like I would not want to live there.
Why is it dynamic? I guess just because it's new.
The economy is very strong. The Singaporeans are reproducing. Their standard of living is quite high. I mean, I don't think it's not a society I would personally want to live in, but that's because I'm a weirdo outsider that doesn't really fit anywhere.
Well, I mean,
like that's more to do with me, not Singapore.
So I actually met some people living in Singapore, right? They were British, I believe. I met them at a music festival.
Yeah.
And again, it seemed very like I didn't end up talking to them much about this, but I will see them again presumably this year, and I want to get to the bottom of like how they're existing there. But
I'm sure they're existing fine, man. I mean, I'm sure they're having a good time. If they,
but like how, right? Like, so is there an underground culture?
Well, there is now. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, so I think once you've reached a point where people are like wiping their asses, then you can start liberalizing from there. But if you don't even if you have like if you have a society where like murder is normal or like, there's no toilet paper, like you can't really like, you can't really like have any sustainable freedom in the sense, if you're like limited by, if conditions are not to the point where you can even do that, then you're gonna, not only are the people not gonna be able to handle the freedoms, but they're not even really gonna want them, right? Because they're like, well, I just need, I need shelter, I need toiit paper, I need
eggs to not cost $1 million, I guess.
I need food, right? So,
sorry, slight jab towards US there.
To US, so I think Singapore is headed in, probably will liberalize increasingly over time. Interestingly, Malaysia, I probably won't, for more, again, cultural.
But, I mean, that's just like a religious kind of
cultural,
state,
religious reasons.
Right? Yeah.
But there's nothing to stop Singapore from continuing to become head in some kind of libertarian direction, in theory. But Malaysia probably won't, because again, it's a very different system. Again, the people that Lee Kuan Yew was negotiating with were like hereditary aristocrats, right? They're like Malay aristocrats.
Okay.
Whereas Lee Kuan Yew is just like some civil servant, right? Just like, he's not like a. So the culture is a very interesting mixture of cultural interactions. So like the founder of Malaysia, what's his name? Tunku Abdul Rahman, I think it was. He's so he's just like some rich, like he's like a king, right? So he's like, his political ideas are a little bit different, I guess. Not that I'm saying he's good or bad, but certainly interesting political situation, interesting mix of different cultures.
Yeah, I mean, I know very little about that area of the world, to be honest.
I think people are sleeping on this history. Like, anyone that's watching this should look into the founding of Singapore and Malaysia, because there's a lot of interesting characters, and there's like some communists thrown in the mix. There's like all kinds of different elements at the time.
Yeah, like the thing that sticks out with me with Malaysia, isn't it like a situation where like the minority race is like disproportionately powerful over like it's the kind of the Chinese Han population is like the political class where most of the people are like Muslim basically.
Well, it kind of is like an ethno state in some ways. I mean, it's multicultural in practice, I guess, but I feel like on paper it does have ethno state elements where the Malays, like it's kind of slanted towards the Malays having most of the.
Which class is that?
Well, that's the Malays are the Malaysians, right?
Okay,
so they're the ethnic group that are like,
but they're like essentially like Han Chinese, or is this a different ethnic group?
No, they're totally different.
Totally different.
They're completely different ethnic group.
Yeah.
They're the Southeast Asian ethnic group.
Okay, right.
So they're closer. I guess like genetically they'd be like what, Indonesians or something.
Yeah, more like Indonesian. Okay,
and the language is similar.
Yeah, it sounds more like that.
So they're just Southeast Asians, right? So they don't really have anything to do with Chinese, right?
Right.
So Chinese
but then they're Muslim, right?
Malays are Muslim.
Muslim, yeah.
But Chinese are not, right?
Right.
So right away there's also there's conflict.
And then there's also like the Indians basically
too,
there, which is another whole
other kettle
spice jar.
Whole other kettle of Indians.
Yeah.
What other metaphors can we mangle here? Whole other kettle of Indians, or whole other truckload of Indians, or something. I don't know. So it's a very complicated society, right? And I think people are sleeping on just how complicated and tricky it was. So I think you gotta give Lee Kuan Yew some respect, even though like I definitely would not have wanted to live in the society he created, but at the same time it was a success. So can't really
it is it is puzzling. It is interesting. I mean clearly they're stable and economically viable. So like I guess that's the ultimate marker of success, question mark. Like,
well, it like this is a problem with, I think when you really get into this like stuff where you're like trying to create functional states, like it's probably like, I think it's easy to have ideals about like what should be the case and like what would be good, but in practice it's like
well, that's the thing, as I was kind of alluded to earlier, like I love libertarian ideals, but then I just recognize that it
isn't going to be functional.
At least not in this phase of like human development, I guess. Like I feel like we could get there if I feel like if people really embodied their existence, then libertarianism increasingly makes sense. But I think a lot of people kind of, the humans basically don't want responsibility. Basically, people shy away from really embodying, and taking ownership of their life, right? And so that's why
they shy away from wiping their ass, right? They want someone else to do that for them.
There's this guy on like I think it was like my university subreddit who his handle was born to shit, forced to wipe.
Forced to wipe, yeah.
And I can't stop thinking about it. Like it keeps coming up.
He just doesn't want to have to do that wiping. Yeah.
Well, like, this is kind of metaphor for life, I think, right?
Yeah.
So we have a.
I think we're probably time, right?
need to land this. Have a few more minutes here.
A few more minutes to land it.
But Singapore.
I certainly don't have a better idea for how to deal with Malaya than I certainly don't have. I certainly wouldn't say I have better ideas than Lee Kuan Yew. I mean, maybe there was some other solution to that situation, but it beats me. I mean, I certainly can't come up with it. So
yeah, it's such a. Did you ever get into like Civilization 6? Well, the whole Sid Meier's Civilization.
No, I never played it.
Yeah,
never played it.
Feel like it kind of plays in this space of building a state.
Yeah. Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. It's funny because like some of the basically you could there's like a skill tree, and you can go into this like um, various routes of like what is your identity, right? Like, is it like authoritarian, fascist type thing? Is it exploratory or whatever, like kind of imperialist? I forget the exact names, but one of them is like piety.
Okay, yeah.
So you could build like a religious state, basically. So, yeah, there is some jump from here to occultism that I can't quite figure out.
A jump to occultism in what way?
Like, well, like, so the ideals of like Crowley, for example. Crowley.
Yeah. He actually has a rhyme about that where he said like, my enemies call me Crowley to treat me most foully. My friends call me Crowley to acknowledge I am holy, or something.
Okay,
like,
I'll remember
he's
that.
actually rhyming about this. Yeah.
That's a clever way to remember it, Crowley. But like thalamic values, kind of thalamic.
Thalamic values.
I'm just going to mispronounce everything. So forgive me.
I think almost everyone. I mean, it's a Greek word, so everyone's probably mispronouncing it.
But there is some overlap with like libertarianism. No.
Well, it's pure. Like in one way of looking at it is it's like absolute libertarianism, where there's like only to the point where like law, like it. I mean, it's hard to even talk about. It's like other than the actual abbey, where they did this, the Abbey of Thelema, but
where they tried to live in accordance. Did it work? Can you build a state on these values?
Well,
or
in practice, it didn't seem to.
Okay.
But there's a lot of ways that you could look at what
working constitutes, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it was certainly important. It was a radical experiment in radical freedom.
Right.
But I think even Crowley admitted that like no one was ready for it.
Yeah.
Because they just couldn't, like, he's like, in practice, like people couldn't handle that degree of radical freedom. And it's just like some other level of I don't know. I mean, there's a lot that could be said about that. But yeah, in theory, I think most Thelemites would say that it's like almost like an absolute libertarianism to the point where and I don't know, like politics in Thelema is such an interesting minefield, I guess, because there's like hard right Thelemites, there's like far left. I mean, you got all degrees of the, so like the interpretations are all over the map, but including Crowley's take. I mean, Crowley, like,
it's like Schrodinger's political orientation or something.
At one point, I think he was trying to steer it in like a feudalism direction, because he's like feudalism is the perfectly functional, like every level is working exactly as it should, and like things are smooth, and again, that's probably surprising for a lot. They're like, feudalism, really? Like this is how you think a Thelemic society would be feudal, really? And you're like, oh, okay, but sort of makes sense. Like I think you could argue that this one way of looking at it, versus other kinds of states, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how that would. It's a difficult. I mean, well, he created, like, the OTO does have a. There's this thing called the Blue Equinox model, where and again, no one has actually done this in practice.
Okay,
but it like the model exists in theory, which I don't think I've read this in full. I've read some parts of it where it's it kind of is like a plan for like how the order would like again, if it had to like reconstruct a society or something, like for how it would reconstruct it,
right,
using the OTO, right, and it is very like hierarchical and feudal, but it also has like weird elements of what would probably be called socialism. So like one of the, and again, it doesn't map cleanly onto like right or left categories. So interestingly, like Crowley was like one way that it doesn't is that like Crowley was very against abortion, for example. So he's like, okay, well, if some, illegitimate children or children that no one wants, who's going to raise them? And he's like, well, they're supposed to be raised by the head of the order, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like he considered one of the responsibilities of the higher ups was actually to raise illegitimate children that other people didn't want to raise. Which is
kind of like a Taurus kind of.
It's a weird way of looking at it because, but again, like going by thelemic logic, like taking more responsibility,
right,
is like you have a higher position because you take more responsibility. Yeah. So the guy that's just oh, I don't want it, I'm just gonna do what I want. Yeah. That guy is lower because he's taking less responsibility. So it's a weird way to conceptualize it, but
I could like almost see how it like could work in a weird way, right?
It's very interesting. I mean, this is called the Blue. He published in this edition of the Quarterly called the Equinox, and it has a blue cover. But yeah, it's basically like a plan for a society, right? That would be functional and thelemic, and again, it maybe doesn't look like what people would think when they hear Crowley or hear but certainly interesting, and I would encourage people to at least investigate it and see what they think. I mean, it's certainly thought-provoking, even if you would maybe disagree with it. But
I'll need to look it up myself. Yeah.
So maybe a good way to call it there.
Yeah. Well, nice work.
All right. Yeah. Let's go. Time to get into some dango here. Got some of these strawberries. Peace out. Justin Isis 93 Instagram and Justin Isis 1 on X.
And Neopasseism on
Neopasseism Substack. Look it up.
Yeah, check it out. Good stuff there. And more coming. DBLV on Instagram. And thanks for listening.
All right.
Like and subscribe.
Peace out. Like and subscribe.